Great. So we have talked about fluency. This is the ultimate goal. Decoding supports fluency because it allows us to slow down our brain's process and actually make meaning of words that are unknown. All of us do this, no matter how experienced we are as readers. And I'm actually going to show you what this looks like when I read a text in a different language that is not my first language, because I think it's really important to immerse yourself in the experience of what it's like to be a reader reading a lot of unknown words. So let's talk a little bit more about decoding. Now, as you remember, decoding is a student's ability to figure out an unknown word by breaking it down into its component parts or making associations with other known words. Let's talk about what those key components are, while I try not to knock over this camera. So, key components. It's hard to read this backwards, but it's okay because I know it. Key components of decoding. So we have the alphabetic awareness, we have phonemic awareness, concepts of print, and then that builds on the idea of automaticity, which connects us to fluency. And then finally, feeding forward, which is another topic and concept that I want to cover that's connected to automaticity. So let's talk about what each of these things mean. And then in a moment, I'm actually going to show you what they mean in context. So alphabetic awareness is literally just our ability to see a letter, know what it is, and know what sound it makes. Simple as that. It's not something that we're born with, and the alphabet is a system of symbols that is meaningless until we learn what it is. It's actually also very hard. We understand from some recent cognitive science research by a few authors, but distilled really accurately by Daniel T. Willingham of University of Virginia. We as humans actually really struggle to interpret the alphabet. It's something that our brains have not evolved very well to do. We're used to recognizing different kinds of patterns. So it makes sense that it actually takes some time for students to learn how to decipher these weird shapes that we've created that are just a series of letters that make sounds. So phonemic awareness then is our ability to break down sounds and recognize what sounds those are, and also to understand that letters come together to make sounds. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a moment. Concept of print is really just the idea of understanding simple things like how sentences are structured, the idea that a sentence is a complete thought, or sometimes not. Things like understanding punctuation and understanding how a book is laid out, how a table of contents works, what a heading is. All of these things are concepts of print, and they really allow us to navigate the roadmap of what it is that we're reading. Automaticity then, as we've talked about before, when we think about fluency, is really just our ability to go from breaking down a word into its component parts, understand, and then being able to start putting those together and chunking them so that our brain creates shortcuts. So no longer do we have to actually see understand as three separate parts that we then link together, but we begin to see parts of the word under and then stand. And then eventually we see understand and we see it and we just know it. And then finally, the concept of feeding forward is the idea that we're actually seeing entire lines of text and we're actually seeing ahead of what it is that our eyes are immediately reading, so that we're comprehending more than just a word at a time, but we're actually starting to see patterns because we practice reading so much that we actually notice and recognize those patterns. So, a couple of things. I'd say pause the video right here. I will hold this up for you. I want you to summarize what each of these things means for you and your students in your own words. Pause the video and go ahead and summarize this just with your partner. Go ahead.